afternoon. I am Susan Kelly. Hi, I am Susan Kelly, President-elect of City Club, filling in once again for our much-traveled President, Patty Tillett. Welcome to another outstanding City Club program. Today we focus on branding of Portland, the marketing of Portland, which goes beyond logos and jingles to the aesthetic and civic heart that we identify as our city. Our guests today are Randy Gragg, architecture and urban design reporter for the Oregonian, who will be the moderator. Chris Riley, Director of Global Marketing for Wieden+Kennedy, Ethan Seltzer, Director of the Institute for Metropolitan Studies at Portland State University, and Sohrab Vossoughi, CEO of Ziba Design. Friday, March 29th, join us for a program entitled Condition Critical, the Physician and Nursing Shortage in Oregon. Our guest speaker will be Dr. Douglas Walta, physician at the Oregon Clinic, and it'll be here at the MAC. For those of you who may not be aware, the City Club website offers access to our research projects, past club program presentations, upcoming events, and membership information. So please check us out at www.pdxcityclub.org. We have just one more week to go in our membership drive, and we're barely halfway there. So we're hoping guests today will consider joining. This is the opportune time. Since Randy Gragg will be doing the introduction of our speakers today, I will also serve as our board host and will ask the first question when our panel is finished. So I now turn it over. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Wait. Following my question, we'll open the program to questions from City Club members in the audience. Please line up behind the microphone, as you usually do, and be ready when when my question is answered. Please identify yourself as a member of the City Club and ask your question in 30 seconds or less. Broadcast of City Club programs this quarter is made possible in part by corporate underwriting from Portland General Electric, CH2M Hill, and Providence Health Systems. We're very grateful for their support. And now I turn it over to Randy.
Thanks for coming. This is a great turnout, and I want to thank the City Club Programming Committee for sort of indulging this idea, since this is a pretty distant departure from my usual activities as an architecture writer. But what I wanted to do was to conduct a sort of small experiment to draw together a trio of strategic thinkers who I admire a lot to brainstorm a brand identity for Portland. My motive was really born of a pretty simple question. Is there a better image to aspire to than the city that works? How many in this room actually know where that slogan comes from? Okay. The story, as I understand it, was the whole thing was instituted with quite a little, very little fanfare in 1995 by Mayor Vera Katz, who thought the City of Roses had wilted. And she sent out a call to city employees who sent 1,100 ideas, from which a mayor-appointed panel selected a winner. It was Michelle Harper, then of Parks Department, who received $250 for her phrase. Presto, 1,500 city cars got stenciled with the new words and the city with a new image. Vaguely Swiss, maybe overtly Protestant, or increasingly some might say ironic. The phrase is maybe better than its homey predecessor, the City of Roses, but I'd like to pose the question, does this sum us up? It reminds me of an architect from a certain very large and often boring firm I once debated, who argued that a truly knowledgeable architecture critic should write about the functional victories of buildings. I asked, well, what's that? And he said, well, like keeping the water out. As an architecture critic, I hope our architects strive for more in buildings than for more than buildings that just don't leak. And as a citizen, I guess I want my city to aspire to more than 9-to-5 competence. In another era, we might have called that something more civitas, but today, in today's early 21st century world of constant competitiveness and perpetual campaigning, increasingly that something more is brand identity. The idea of branding cities is becoming pretty commonplace, actually, but mostly, I think, with examples of what not to do. Try a few of these. Atlanta, Georgia, welcome to the possibility city. Anything is possible. Ottawa, Canada's advanced technology capital. Paria, New Zealand. It's amazing. North Bay, Ontario, just north of enough to be perfect. These examples aside, I suspect a city brand can be more than a sales pitch. Certainly brands like Coke, Toyota, Apple, or Nike are far more than products. They're about taste and trust and belief. They're about team. Who do you want to belong to? Let's consider some other city brands. Freudian slip there. Kansas City, America's smart city, where in an effort to become the nation's top high-tech job attractor, the K-10 highway has been promoted as America's smart corridor for the location of new businesses, where residential developers have built high-tech, well-wired suburban communities promoted as smart neighborhoods, where in preparation for an ever more competitive world, even kids' programs have been devised under the label Smart Play. Or consider Edinburgh, which has embraced a very old economy notion, excellence. The original idea was to simply create a brand around the stamp made in Edinburgh, but it eventually evolved into a more ambitious project of defining that logo as a brand of quality. To meet eligibility standards of the Excellence in Edinburgh seal, you have to earn accreditation through a rigorous review of your services or your products by a city panel. Smart City and Excellence in Edinburgh are sales pitches to be sure, but they're also civic images that invite participation and teamwork. In short, they're strategic. We're smart, we are excellent. So what is Portland? To think about this, I thought it would be interesting to look beyond the usual suspects of retail and tourism marketers, and how about not polling the public? Instead, I thought it would be interesting to solicit some ideas from a team of strategists, two who live here but work across the globe, one who has devoted the last 22 years of his life to understanding this place globally. Sohrab Vossoughi is the founder and president of Ziba Design, where he has directed product and institutional and identity design projects for McDonald's, FedEx, Xerox, Black & Decker, Sony, Microsoft, Ford, Whirlpool, and Hewlett-Packard, to name just a few. A native of Iran who's lived in the U.S. since 1971, Sohrab has been named Entrepreneur of the Year by Businessweek magazine, selected as one of the 100 global leaders of tomorrow by the World Economic Forum, and elected as one of the 50 most influential designers in the U.S. Most recently, Ziba became the first firm in history to win 4 gold medals in Businessweek's Excellence in Industrial Awards. Industrial Design, excuse me. And speaking of brands, Ziba in Farsi means beautiful. Chris Riley is the Director of Planning for Wieden+Kennedy, a native of Manchester, England, one of the world's great generators of cultural fodder for brands. Chris became an ardent researcher of American political behavior and subsequently of consumer behavior and psychology. He's worked for Chiat Day and BBDO on accounts as diverse as Pizza Hut, Gillette, Apple, and Philips Electronics. In 1990, Dan Wieden hired him as the agency's first director of planning, where he worked on virtually every one of the agency's accounts, from Nike to Miller Beer to Audi. As a journalist, I have the privilege of talking to a lot of incredibly bright people, but very few of them so routinely shift my thinking as Chris. His job succinctly is to think about what the rest of us will be thinking about. Finally, to kick off our discussion is Ethan Seltzer, who I'm sure many of you know as the founding director of the Institute for Metropolitan Studies in Portland State University. He's created the city's preeminent think tank and himself become the city's preeminent spokesperson for civic values. Winner of the 1997 Mayor's Spirit of Portland Award, he is currently vice president of the Portland Planning Commission and has served on everything from the Portland Parking Meter Revenue Task Force to the boards of Reach Community Development and the 40-mile Loop Land Trust. He also has the distinction of once being quoted by 3 different Oregonian reporters in a single issue of the Oregonian, causing my editors to call for at least a brief moratorium on Seltzer. So I'll turn it over to Ethan. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks, Randy. Well, it's great to be here. It's an honor to be here. City Club, I think, in many ways is part of, whatever the brand is today and whatever the brand will be tomorrow. And in fact, Nancy, I will be renewing my membership, and if you come get my Visa card right now, you can do it on the spot, or otherwise I'll send it to you. I'll leave it up to you. When Randy first got a hold of me to see if I'd talk about Brandy in Portland, I was thinking I don't know much about pop music, and I prepared a lot of material about Brandy and Madonna and Britney Spears, and then finally he explained to me that it wasn't about Brandy, it was about branding, and I thought that was a fine thing too, so I just kind of shifted the words around a little bit. And I think what I'd like to do today to help set the stage really for what's going to come, we've had some great conversations leading up to this, is to really kind of lay out three kind of ideas to help frame the discussion maybe, and then talk in specifics about some things that are really part of who we are today, and then we can kind of move into this rather rapidly. Okay, so first, three things about this notion of branding. The first is that branding a place is not just exactly like branding soap, Maybe our motto someday will be, it floats, but I'm not sure that necessarily will get us where we want to go. Because we're trying to do different things with this brand. The idea of having a city brand is that it's got to talk to really two audiences. It has to talk to us, it has to help us know what we need to know. It has to inspire us to do certain things. I mean, this is something we don't just say, but we do. The second is it needs to speak to them, to people from outside the city, from people joining the city. What do we want others to think about us? Once they think that, what do we want them to do? And I suppose in some ways this is related to something that Kim Stafford says frequently, which is that there's only, really two stories in the world. I came to a strange place and a stranger came to our place. That's basically it. All stories kind of, take one of those two paths. In the same sense, I think the brand for us, for a place, has to speak to both of those paths. So it's a little bit different. We have to keep both audiences in mind. We've got to be successful looking both ways. The second thing is that branding Portland increasingly means branding the metropolitan area. We live regional lives. It's increasingly difficult to find anybody who lives, works, socializes, recreates, shops, lives, is born, lives, and dies within the same jurisdictional boundaries. I mean, it just doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen very often in our lowest income neighborhoods, and it certainly doesn't happen very often in our highest income neighborhoods. The rest of the world sees us as one place, if they see us at all. I don't know how many I'm sure many of us have had experiences saying, where are you from? Well, I'm from Portland. It's north of California, if you're kind of several thousand miles away. Or if you're sitting on an airplane and someone says, where are you from? The reference is frequently to what is really a metropolitan place. And in fact, if you kind of venture, even much further afield out into, other continents, Oregon is probably a clearer sense of kind of where we are than Portland in some ways. So I think we really need to be careful about not thinking too narrowly about the territory that we're speaking of when we speak of this brand. The third thing to keep in mind, I think, as we have this conversation today, is to think about the relationship that a good brand, a successful brand, can play in making us a more competitive place. Because make no mistake, we're competing with other metropolitan areas for talent, for recognition, and for the growth and change that we want in this community. We're not just doing this by ourselves, we're doing it in a global context. The brand is what can help distinguish ourselves. But don't get too narrow in your thinking about what this notion of competitiveness means, because it really does have two roots. One is being as good as other places. Can you get a building permit faster here than in Boise? Can you pay your parking tickets more conveniently here than in San Jose? But I think in thinking about are we as good as other places, the fundamental message is we need to look outward. We need to think about who we're competing with. But I think the second part of competitiveness is really the part we really want to focus on today in some ways, which is excelling at what sets us apart. What makes this place unlike any other place, and how do we express that? There are not many places where you can take a day trip to the wilderness. There are not many places where you can ski in the morning, windsurf in the afternoon, and drink local world-class wine at night. There are some things about this region that, in fact, are pretty remarkable. And so I think being competitive as a region in many ways means leveraging the assets and strengths that we do have into new opportunities and bringing the brand alive, whatever that brand's going to be, because of who we are, not because of what others think we should be. So, what does make Portland Portland? And I'm sure this is something that you think a lot about. We've tried to think at least a little bit about it. But I think there are a couple of things that do make Portland Portland. The landscape, the environment, quality of life related to a life close to nature. I don't know how much we appreciate that, but this place really is distinguished by that in several ways. A couple years back, I went to the biggest wholesaler of postcards in the Portland area to find out what's the postcard view of Portland. What do we put in those racks out there? Which postcards sell the best? And it really is, one of two things. It's either, kind of this kind of diminished skyline surrounded by trees, or it's mountains. It's kind of looking outward. It's not kind of San Francisco looking at the Transamerica Tower and kind of seeing the skyline. It's a very different kind of orientation. The theme, I think, carries on when you start to look at what do people do with their time, how do they spend their money, and we find that in this metropolitan area, people spend a lot more on recreational equipment, they spend a lot more time hiking and camping, they spend a lot more time gardening. I think organic gardening has more subscriptions in the Portland metropolitan area than any other metropolitan area in the nation. There's something kind of going on outside, and that's a big part of kind of who we are. Second part is we talk and we do. Carl Abbott has written a terrific new book, I don't know how many of you have seen it, called Greater Portland, which really describes a lot of the recent history of Portland. It's really a neat read. But what Carl describes is that there's an intentional civic style here. Randy mentioned before, let's not do a poll. But part of what we do is we do things like this, and I don't think we often appreciate how much we get together compared to other places. It's a pretty amazing thing. And again, when you start to look at how people spend their time and money, you can see further evidence that we are set apart from other places because we like to get together and make up our own minds in different ways. We use libraries a lot. We use bookstores a lot. Our subscriptions to cable TV are actually slightly lower than in other places. Our internet use is really high. Our book purchases are high. Newspaper subscriptions tend to be higher here than in other metropolitan areas. All of which kind of speaks to a population that expects to make up its mind and to do something about it. People make and have made this place, and that continues to be part of our assets, part of who we are. The third is that innovation happens here. And it's kind of interesting. We're a marginal place. We're marginal geographically. We're at the upper left edge. We're marginal economically. This is an economic place that's not as big as other economic places on the West Coast, but we're kind of at the edge. We don't have an economy dominated by a single employer or even by Fortune 500 companies, which is kind of an interesting twist. And culturally, we're kind of at the edge. And one of the things about being at the edge is that there have been a lot of studies to show that innovation happens at the margin. We have the opportunity to take advantage of that. Will we take advantage of that? Will we continue to be known as a place that takes advantage of that? Fourth, we have expertise here. In fact, I think we need to be real careful to understand not only do we have expertise, but we have probably expertise that we have not even tapped into yet. We have industries that are leaders in their field and that are heavily concentrated here. Semiconductors, creative services, lumber and wood products, nursery products. Marcus Simmentel's here, but the nursery products industry is probably one of the most high-tech industries in the state of Oregon. It's unbelievable what's happened with nursery products. I'm not just talking about engineering the vinca so it grows better with less attention, which I'm sure many of you are grateful for. But that's right. Remember the Mugo pine? That's history. We don't do that anymore. But in any event, it's the way in which that industry is organized, the way it markets its products, the way it connects with its markets. Amazing. It's a totally amazing industry. We have a lot of expertise there, and the kind of expertise in that industry is not only good for agriculture, but it actually happens to be good for a variety of other things that we're good at. This has been a crossroads, this region for many, many years. In fact, this is one of the oldest inhabited places in North America, 10,000 years of human habitation. And this kind of crossroads of, kind of high tech and creative services on one hand, and on the other, industries which really have their roots in the landscape and the productive value of the resources here, coming together is a really unbelievable combination, and it's distinguished us in the past, and I think will distinguish us in the future. So as I wrap up, I guess what I'll leave you with is that to some degree we already do have a brand identity, muddled though it may be. We are clean, we are green, and we are quirky. And now I think the challenge that we have is threefold. Number one, are we comfortable with being clean, green, and quirky? Should we try and change that? What's missing? Second, if we like being clean, green, and quirky, how do we make that clearer and much more compelling than it is? We're getting kind of pedestrian in our quirkiness, I think. Although I think some would argue with that. And then finally, what do we have to do as a community to live up to that brand, or any brand? What does it mean, as Randy said to me, the city that works? What does it mean to be a city that works? Are we up to the challenge of being what we say we are? And with that, I'll pass it on to Sohrab. Thank you.
Hello everyone. As Randy mentioned, my name is Sohrab Vossoughi, and I design products. For the past 20 years, I have made my living by turning ideas into words and objects. My job is to give expression to ideas that are unspoken. Most of these 20 years I have been living in Portland and have been spending in Portland. And like most of you, I'm here because I want to be. I wasn't drawn to Portland by the climate. I was not drawn to Portland by professional opportunity or the promise of riches. I wasn't drawn to Portland for personal reasons, but I was drawn to Portland by something, by that unique quality that makes this place and its people special and unlike other places. And it is that special quality that I would like to talk to you about today. First, thank you very much for including me this afternoon in this afternoon's discussion for Search for Portland's Identity. You know, our conversation this afternoon is part of what makes Portland unique. Your presence and this group of speakers engage in a discussion of who we are, how we can identify ourselves, and how we can be better is part of the civic pride and activism that gives Portland its unique character. People in Portland care about Portland. It always helps to define the issue to be discussed. How do we want to identify ourselves? What are we looking for? Are we talking about a slogan or a motto? Are we searching for a catchphrase that will increase tourism and makes the Chamber of Commerce happy? Or is this discussion more fundamental? Are we searching for our soul? Are we looking for our essence? As I understand it, our discussion this afternoon is about more than a motto. Portland, the city that works. Our discussion is about identity. More specifically, our brand identity. Who are we and what we want to be? As Randy indicated in his opening remarks, branding cities, states, and regions is increasingly popular. Catchy phrases that capture the heart of a city in a handful of words have become widespread. Is this something that we have started on the West Coast? Is this something that is unique to the United States? Where did it all begin, and where will this search for regional identity take us? My search for the source of modern urban motto took me all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Apparently, the trend towards urban branding has been around for a while. In preparing my remarks, I became interested in why New York is known as the Big Apple. An apple is red, so is a rose. An apple is a fruit. A rose is a flower. Do we have more in common with New York than we really like to think of? Why do fruits and flowers identify cities like New York and Portland? The Big Apple and the City of Roses have some of the attributes of a good brand. They are short, they are memorable, and they're unique. They are not, however, descriptive or aspirational. In other words, they are not statements of what New York or Portland hopes to be. So let's focus on Big Apple for a minute before coming back to Portland. By mid-19th century, New York had more houses of ill repute, basically bordellos, than any major US city. Apparently, New York was the center of the nation's entertainment industry before our nation had an entertainment industry. Based on a longer story, which we don't have time for today, the women in the employment of these houses were referred to as apples. A gentleman's directory of New York City published in 1870 contained the following phrase: "In freshness, sweetness, beauty, and firmness to the touch, New York's apples are superior to any in the new world or the old world." And that's true. So it was based. So it was based on this distinction that New York was routinely described as the apple tree or the real apple. Gradually, the reference was widely accepted and the brand was shortened to the Big Apple. So what can we learn from the Big Apple? A brand does not need to be descriptive or aspirational to work. As you would expect, Portland's association with the rose is more respectable, of course. And as many of you know, it was in 1889 that one of our better-known citizens, C.S. Wood, suggested an annual festival of roses. And of course, the rest is history. Putting roses and apples aside for a moment, let's return to the idea of brand. More than a slogan or a motto, a brand is a set of associations in the mind of a listener or a reader. Nike is an appropriate and familiar example. What started as a running brand, track shoes, gradually became a sports brand, baseball shoes, and then a fitness brand, aerobic shoes. Today, Nike is about much more than shoes, and the brand continues to evolve. No matter what the company's marketing managers might say, the Nike brand is what you think. In the same way, Portland does not need to search for a brand identity. We already have one. We always have. From the beginning, Portland has attracted people from other places. We are at the end of the Oregon Trail, not a stop along the way. This is where people were headed. This is where people came because it was where they wanted to be. The city has long attracted people who are comfortable with being out of the way and being who they are. The rain requires that we spend time indoors and makes us comfortable with the quiet solitude. People seldom describe Portland as bustling or intense. What's the phrase most often used to describe Portland? Can you remember what your friends and family say when they visit? Have they ever said, "It's a city that works," or "It's a city of roses"? What they usually say are things such as, "It's a great place to raise a family. It's quiet, great schools. Man, it rains a lot. The mountains and the oceans are right there. The people are nice." One of the defining characteristics of Portlanders is their comfort with isolation. People here are not like people in the other places. More importantly, they don't want to be. What we see going on around us is a global rush toward urban and regional branding. From excellence to Edinburgh to Atlanta's possibility city, cities are trying to create an image, craft a phrase, and hit the street. Is that right for Portland? I'm not sure. Marketeers understand the importance of being different. If you want to stand out, offer simplicity amidst confusion, like Apple Computer. To quote a well-known architect and product designer, Mies van der Rohe, less is more. Sometimes silence speaks volumes. Sometimes no news is news. If the world is rushing toward catchphrases, perhaps Portland should be what we have always been, different. Perhaps we should continue to be the place where people want to go and the place where people want to be. We may not need a catchy phrase or a snappy logo. Perhaps our city and its people are enough. As the inscription on the Skidmore fountain reads, "The riches of a city are its citizens." That hasn't changed for Portland. Randy opened our discussion by suggesting if we want to make a lasting impression on the world around us, we will have to rewrite the motto, "Portland, the city that works." I agree. To capture our essence, to put into words all the richness that is ours and all the things our city can be, I suggest something with a little more punch. I suggest a motto with a little more mystery. Something more thought-provoking and memorable. I suggest a motto that will be heard over the noise of catchy city brands in South Dakota, Rhode Island, and around the world. If Mayor Katz asked me to repaint the city's fleet of trucks, I would choose a motto with maximum impact and one we can all be proud of. On the side of every city truck, you would see one word: Portland. Thank you.
I'm in trouble, because this is all I have. These guys. Where to start? Well, I'm a strategic planner, and I help people think about how to communicate. So I'm pretty interested in what people think and how they feel about places and how they feel about objects, and more recently, how they feel about businesses. And I think my role here is to attempt to define a brand, what a brand is. Because you can go to many different places and different people have different views of what a brand is. I've heard that a brand is a large iron object that if you heat it to extreme temperatures and place it on the backside of a cow, it will identify the cow as being your cow. And in fact, that's probably the origin of brands. It's about branding. It's an ownership kind of symbol. Some people think they're logos, other people think they're lines or whatever. But increasingly, I think brands are none of those things at all. They're ideas, they are philosophies that businesses hold, and they use them not only to communicate the value of their products, but they use them to communicate the value of their companies. And increasingly, that value is not necessarily a purely functional value. It used to be the case that you could go out and you could say to somebody, well, it's a washing powder, it's called Tide, and they would communicate back to you that it works really well, cleans, whiter than white, color's really bright. And that was a practical benefit of that thing. But today when you go out and talk to people, they kind of know all that stuff. They understand that detergents are supposed to clean clothes whiter and brighter, and they understand shoes are supposed to be comfortable, and they understand that cars are theoretically supposed to be comfortable and efficient and fast and all of those kind of things. The thing they're less certain about, and which is confusing them, and this occurs all over the world, is they're a little unclear as to who's making these products. They're a little unclear as to who they're buying these products from. So if you imagine that many, many, many people basically agree that these products are pretty good and agree that in the main they're as good as each other, but they still need to make decisions. Increasingly, one of the decisions they make is to buy that product or that service from a company that they admire or a company that they respect, or at least understand. Now, the whole idea of marketing for 2 generations was to avoid that particular subject, because what you had to do was you had to cloak your product or your service in some kind of image, some kind of artifice that allowed you to disguise yourself. My favorite example of this is actually a really great company. It's a company called Procter & Gamble that has done many really amazing things, but one of the things it did was it disguised the fact that it was a chemical company by creating the impression that it was a family company. It was about cleaning clothes, and it was about the relationships you had with your children, which has always been held up as a really amazing thing. And if you have a look at the history of their brands and products like Tide, they did a really good job. Suddenly people would buy their products because they felt really good about them, rather than purely because it was a really effective chemical that did a really good job. Today, however, Procter & Gamble have got a whole bunch of problems, not least of which is the fact is nobody's got a clue who they are, and everybody's a bit spooked by the idea of using detergents, particularly if you're environmentally conscious, which we all are here in Oregon. So they've got some kind of issues about who they are. About 6 months ago, Wieden+Kennedy with one of our clients went around the world, and we went to 11 countries. We talked to people about business, and we talked to people about media and brands and advertising, and all the kind of stuff that is important in our world. And one of the things that came back was really simple. It was so stunningly simple that it amazed me, and I realized that I'd just been overcomplicating my entire career for forever. We were talking to people who were in the main in their mid-20s, people whose point of view about companies and brands is pretty important because they influence other people. And they came back and they said, this is the only thing we want to know. We want to know who you are. And that was it. Now, once they've got to know who you are, they have a set of ideals about what kind of people they want to know. So they want to go who you are, and what they're doing is they're saying, well, are you a little bit like me? So it becomes part of the identity question. But when they say who you are, what they're trying to find out is two very important things. They're trying to find out what your values are, and do those values resonate with my values, so that I'm happy to do business with you, even if it's only buying a 50-cent chocolate bar. And they want to know what you do. Two things. What are your values, and what do you do? And this is increasingly important. Oh. She's friendly. She moves the microphone. Thank you. Increasingly, I lost my train of thought then. Who are you and what do you do? Oh yes, increasingly, the values piece is important. You line up 5 different companies. I don't know how many of you actually work in companies. I know there's a lot of public employees here, but you line up 5 different companies, and they may be all making the same thing. Maybe it's a computer chip, or maybe it's a bottle of water. That'd be a good one. And, you know, it's a bottle of water. So there are 5 companies producing a bottle of water. Well, they've all figured out how to do it pretty efficiently, so they're all those bottles of water are like $1. So there's now 5 companies selling a bottle of water for $1. Now, some of those companies are going to say, well, our water tastes real fresh because it comes like out of the springs in the Rockies. Somebody else will go, well, ours is Canadian water, and all of these kind of things. But really, it's just a bottle of water for $1, right? So as people approach those decisions, they kind of go, well, you know, are you a good company? Are you like me? Can I respect you? If I buy your bottle of water, am I paying my money to a group of people that I think are worthy of paying money to? And any of those, I assume there are people here who are also in service industries, and you know that it's like in the advertising industry, that if you're pretty good to your clients and you cloak your relationship in something more than just efficiency, like if you're nice to them, you know, if you treat them with respect, if you don't dress like an idiot every time you go to meet their boss, you know, they tend to be a little bit more loyal, right? So it's about who you are and what your values are. Now, we live in this kind of hyper-mediated global information culture that everybody loves talking about, and that means that we kind of know who people are all over the world, and we have a really good sense of it. So suddenly, this media culture is opening up all kinds of things. One of the things that's opening up is the real people in the real businesses. So you can now go out and talk to a 20-year-old, and not only do they know what you make, they have a really good sense of who you are, because they just read on the news that you bought the local electricity company, made $750 million, and then disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving your retirement fund in tatters. Now, I can tell you that every single piece of market research I've been involved in for the last 6 months, that has been the first topic of conversation. And then they go, okay, so if that's how business operates, and here's the Gap, or here's, you know, whoever, how do I respond to those kind of things? So they're really interested in who you are. So all I wanted to say really was that as you consider the idea that Portland could be marketed as a brand, or could be thought of as a brand, that really you're only answering those 2 questions. Who are you, and what do you do? And the answer is not that you just work, you know, we know that. Although I made the mistake at one of our lunches of sitting down, Randy goes, what do you think of the city that Portland that works? And I'm kind of a gullible guy, so I didn't realize that I was supposed to say, I think it's a dreadful thing. I went, you know, I thought it was pretty good. And he kind of paled, and things weren't going according to plan. And I pointed out that I come from Manchester, which was, when I left it, had 22% unemployment. And so as I approached the notion of the city that works, and I'm raising kids in a city of, you know, pretty good employment, I'm thinking this is a good promise to a guy who's just come from a hyper-unemployment scenario. So I thought it was pretty good for a while. But of course now I agree with the consensus because I'm an advertising guy. So. A couple of other things. One is that as people ask you who you are and what do you do, one of the things that they will decide is what is your position within our culture. So they'll go, well, you know, are you old-fashioned? Are you modern? You know, should I follow you, or do you just kind of sit there and kind of exist, right? And in the main, brands that do well offer some kind of leadership. And I know this is, particularly in business circles, this gets to be a very annoying conversation because everybody's a leader. Everybody. The idea of leadership becomes something around the notion that I have ideas which are affecting or in some way are changing the world within which I live. Now, if you're making a product like Procter & Gamble did that fundamentally alters the experience of being a mother, okay, for the better, then that's a pretty good leadership thing. But these days, it seems to be the case that leadership is coming from ideas that transform the way we interact with our culture. And so businesses that use brands, and I would argue cities that try to adopt them, are in some way trying to connect themselves to the mainstream of culture in a leadership way. So the question becomes, what is it that Portland's thinking and doing that is somehow leading the way other people may think about the lives they live, their cultural lives. So the city that works fails that thing. The other thing I'd say is that there are some really great brands that don't have lines at all. The Gap doesn't have a line. Nike uses its lines sparingly. Armani is $1 billion brand with no line. So it's really not about a catchy line. It's about an idea which has some kind of leadership. It's about a philosophy, a set of values, a set of ideals. When people come across it, they kind of go, oh yeah, they're taking me somewhere. And when New York rose to prominence, it was taking people somewhere. You know, ironically, the Apple became the center of capitalism. Or when Paris, France was rising, it was leading. Florence, which was basically a business and a really good location, led the way people thought about the relationship between commerce and art. So the leadership piece is pretty important. So when you look at what's going on here and you begin to think of the brand, have a look around and ask people outside of the city and ask them, what are we doing here that seems to be transforming the way other people could expect to live? And I would argue there's enormous amounts of that, but I won't go into it because it's been kind of referred to. The final thing I'll say, and then we should just chit-chat, is an anecdote. A lot of this stuff is about archetypes. So, if I say Germany, half of you are going to go, oh, well organized. So I do a lot of work in Japan. So here's my anecdote about Japan, which has an identity crisis, okay? And I happen to be working with a group of people who are dealing with that issue, so it's kind of pertinent. So you arrive at, how many people fly regularly to Narita Airport? One, good, I can tell this story without fear. So you arrive at Narita Airport, and of course, it's got the kanji script. And it says, welcome to Japan. So I go, this is great, welcome to Japan. Then it says, people with diseases, please report here.
Well, so we haven't come up with a replacement for the city that works. But it seems to me, in listening to everybody, what we maybe have come up with is the notion that we may not need a phrase, but a strategy might be an interesting thing to have. And so I'm only going to ask one question, and I'm going to turn it over to you all. But my question to the panel is, what strategy would you advocate, would you have the next mayor of Portland advocate to make Portland more Portland?
Yes, me?
Let's go down the line.
I thought I said it. I agree with Chris that I think this whole branding is being mistaken with just catchy phrases, and I think that's the problem. We have to go deeper. We have to understand the culture of this place, and the things that basically filters what we talk about, and basically the things that filters the way we walk, and the things that we advocate. I mean, we can say all kinds of things about ourselves, but what we really do is different. And that filter is what we really have to capture, and that's our culture. Those are the values, and based on that, we develop a strategy. And so I'm just saying that I don't think that a catchy phrase is the answer to branding. As Chris said, branding is much more than that.
Me? Okay. One of the most amazing things, if you just assume for a second that the brand has to respond to three things. One is the business culture, because without a good, healthy business environment, you don't have a good economy and all of that. Two, it has to respond to the environment that we're creating, responding to, changing in some kind of way. And three, the people who live here. So it's a combination of all of those three things. One of the most remarkable things that's happening in our world is there's being a sea change in the way people respond to the idea of business and the idea of capitalism. And that sea change is people are really looking for the human benefit of all of that. They're a little tired of seeing their world defined only in economic terms. They're real tired of the commoditization of everything, including love, which is why I hate De Beers so much. 1 month's salary buys me a token of love for my wife, apparently. But they really don't like that. And what they're consistently saying, if you listen to the world is we want to approach the world which is more human. That the capitalist ethic did some really amazing things, but it also did some pretty dumb things. And we want to live in a world that is defined by human values. That would be one of the first things that you would hear if you asked anybody to describe their experience within business. You've got people in the corporate world who want more human experiences of work. You've got people who are buying products who want more human relationships with the people they buy products from. So that's a really big deal. The second thing that you'll hear, particularly from the young, is that they want to have a life within which they feel people respect their environment. And anybody who is ignoring this huge issue that is coming down the pike is ignoring probably the most significant factor in politics and in business, which is the young have their issue. And their issue is the environment, particularly in the United States, but also in every other country within which we work. So the environment becomes really, really important. So they're looking at it as a social issue. They're looking at the environment, and they're looking at people, and they're looking at businesses, and they want them to coexist. And their sense of it all is it's all about people. When you look at Portland, we had this great conversation here at one of the lunches. When you have a look at Portland, the thing people always say to me is it's one of the most livable cities. People like it here. It's nice. People feel good here. And that's because it's about the people. It's not about the economy. It's not about just the environment. It's not about any of those things. It's about the people. Now think about Manhattan. That's not about the people. That's about people operating within a machine, within an economic machine. If you're going to have a look at Paris, that's not about the people. That's a top-down command and control system. That's the aristocracy. If you go to London, that's not about the people. That's about the merchants and the relationships they created around the world. So there's something unique about the fact that Oregon and Portland in particular has really made a huge effort to respond to the needs, desires, and lives of its people. It's the people, stupid, would be a good phrase. And then Ethan comes along. He's my new. I'm an ad guy, so I steal things, and I'm going to steal everything this man talks about because it's so brilliant. But he comes along and he says to me, "Well, you've got to understand that you see that Washington was colonized by capital, and Oregon was colonized by people." And then he went on and he explained all these wonderful things about land parcels in Oregon. So I would say that the philosophy has to be something about the people, and that a city that puts its people first and really understands how a diverse group of people can live together and thrive and raise their kids here is huge. And it's a leadership stance. We have amazing organizations in Portland. Nike is one of them. EcoTrust is another one. There are very many others. But they are leadership organizations, and there are people here thinking leadership thoughts, which we should be promoting.
Right. Well, I heart all of that, and yeah, that's right. But it is the people. There's a really wonderful thing. I'd love to see the doors on the truck say, it's the people, stupid. I think that would be kind of fun. And I look around this room and I think, there are people here who I agree with. There's people here who I've disagreed with, but there's nobody here who I wouldn't want to work with for the rest of my life. And I think that's important. But this is kind of what it comes down to for me. I want to vote for a candidate for mayor next time who has a 4-part platform. Okay. And this is kind of what I'm looking for. Number one, that Portland is a good place for kids because kids are kind of the indicator species of our society right now. That changes from time to time, but right now it's kids. Number two, I want someone who's going to work real hard to take the ideas that Sohrab and Chris have just laid out for us and say, I want Portland to be known as a creative place. This is going to be a creative place, and put some of those things in motion. Number three, I want a mayor who says, we are going to ensure that Portland is a location of choice for the most talented people in the world. This is where people with cutting-edge ideas come because they can work here in a way that's unfettered by the kind of conventions and structures and cultures of other places, and they recognize that. And number four, I want a mayor who says, and at the same time we're trying to attract the most talented people in the world, we're going to be building pathways of opportunity for the least skilled, lowest paid people in our community. Mayor comes along with a platform like that, they got my vote.
My question may be more directed to Randy. My boss, City Commissioner Charlie Hales, has an oft-quoted phrase that could go on the side of the trucks. Portland, the best little European city in America. And one of the reasons for that is our excellent improvements in transit options. We were, this last year, by Bicycling Magazine, designated the best bicycling city in the country. Of course, we have our streetcar, beautiful, colorful streetcars, airport light rail, and the Interstate Max line will be ready in a couple of years. So my question, in lieu of what Chris is saying about the environment, and to with Ray Polani here, what can we do to get our children using the bus, using light rail, and get our culture force out of our cars?
Boy. Well, by simply continuing to expand, the options. I mean, the bicycle paths are incredible. I mean, I think that you would find, as Chris says, I mean, this is the issue of the younger generation, and they're going to increasingly exploit those options. So I mean, I think we just have to keep proceeding as aggressively as we can. My own, sort of peccadillo about the transportation systems in Portland is that we have some fabulous looking streetcars, but we have some awfully ugly streetcar stops that don't really actually support those streetcars. And it may seem like a trivial, he's a design guy, just trashing this thing. But I mean, I use the streetcar a lot, and it is not a pleasant place to wait for the streetcar. And I think that you have to think about, as Sohrab would no doubt support. You have to think about the total experience, and I don't know that we've thought about the total experience of transit yet. We've thought about building transit. We've tried to expand it as much as we can, but I don't know that we've successfully created a good transit experience. And so I guess that's what I would advocate. Anybody else?
Well, just real briefly, I guess what I would do is I would look at the demographics along the different bus lines, and on the line on the 14 that goes up Hawthorne, I'd set up a partnership with the Regional Arts and Culture Council and put acoustic rock and roll musicians on the buses going up Hawthorne. I'd put chamber orchestras on the buses going up Council Crest. I'd put jugglers on the buses going to up the number 9 my bus takes me to Northeast Portland. Let's look at the total experience. Sounds good to me.
Erwin Mandel, City Club member. I've only been in Portland about 9 years, and having been involved in a number of things, there is an outstanding characteristic for me that you might want to think about when you come to mottos. And that is, we have 2 formal bureaucracies devoted to planning, OPDR and the Planning Bureau. In addition to which, we have 2 very hard-working volunteer citizens groups devoted to planning, Design Review Commission and the Planning Commission. When these are not enough, we call in outside experts. We've just gotten through with a planning for the West End, where we brought in 7 outside experts to help us with the problem. And apparently, we're now considering the downtown retail planning. Let me, rather than Ethan's, picking up on Ethan and saying the city that quirks, let me suggest we do something Portland, planning for people. Question, what do you think of it?
No takers?
No.
Len Bergstein, City Club member. I was expecting somewhat of a less self-congratulatory discussion today. Let me give you a couple of other trademarks or elements of our brand here. We have a Superfund River. We have a school system that's in chaos and disrepair. No one will take the job. We have a state government in which our city is at odds with the rest of the state and is utter gridlock. And our most prominent citizen, our cultural icon, is fighting on celebrity boxing against Paula Jones. When everybody else looks at this city with those trademarks, what really is the brand that Portland has in your mind?
I'll take that. Apparently the ad guy's going to take that. The conversations we had about the brand were really interesting, because if you have a philosophy or a set of values that are really easy to understand, and if it is, we're planning for people, or it's something like that people can really believe in, then I really do believe that that can help you resolve some of those issues. That is the purpose of having it. That you create a brand to which that inspires you, to which you want to be part of, and then you go and have a look at all those issues that you've just raised. I can't see where he's gone. You look at all those issues you've raised, and then politicians who have to go and get voted in, and bureaucrats that have to be evaluated, you begin to have something to evaluate those people against. And maybe, just maybe, and this is how it works in business, it gives you a tool for making decisions and moving these gridlocks forward. So that would be the role of the brand in a business sense. But I think the points you raise are really good ones, and well taken.
I can second that too also, because I think there's not this really defined strategy the way we, there might be strategy, but it's not defined, because brand does that. It creates a focal point, and so everybody is swimming in the same direction. I think this, because some of the stuff that you just mentioned happens because everybody has a little bit different agenda or whatever, and if you can really capture the brand very clearly and articulate it, and then I think you see a lot more focus, and everybody will be pedaling toward the same direction and working together. So I second what Chris said.
Andy Linehan, City Club member. Len has stolen my thunder a little bit, which is probably expected because he's kind of a strategic thinking guy, but several of you mentioned that a brand really needs to come out of actions as much as from words. And earlier, Ethan Seltzer said the city was clean, green, and quirky, but I wonder whether, in light of the recent school board decision to cut back the number of days that city students will be educated each year, that news story has apparently been in the New York Times and the Washington Post, etc. Do you think the brand for Portland is now clean, green, quirky, and ignorant?
I'll respond to that. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we've cared about for a long time is in jeopardy right now. I think there's no question about it. In the resolving the school funding crisis, not just for Portland, but for the state of Oregon, is probably one of the most pressing things, because it's not just about kind of what we're inflicting on the kids who are here. It's also about our inability to attract people who value education for their kids and who we need to grow our economy in the next century. So, yeah, this is a huge issue. But I think I'll go back to the answer to the last question, which is that a good brand is about kind of shaping how you think about where you're going. We hopefully aren't going to define ourselves, as a city which is defined by its deficiencies, but rather by a city and a region which is essentially defining itself by what it's aspiring to. And the brand can give us, or the way I think this has been spoken of today, can maybe give us some strategic advice. It won't solve the school funding crisis. That takes leadership, and that takes money, and that takes people taking risks, and we don't see that yet. But at least I think if we have a clearer sense of what we're aspiring to and we can express it that way, it becomes more impossible to back away from those challenges than it is apparently right now.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a quick response to that. The great period of innovation in Portland was in the 70s, and really grew out of the 72 downtown plan. I mean, that launched a kind of new Portland. And what a lot of people, I think, especially newcomers, don't seem to realize is that, the city's back was against the wall. And in some ways, things getting worse, I think, may be good, because I think we've experienced a period of relative complacency. And I think that, great innovation frequently comes out of, difficult times, and we're facing some very difficult times. And so I'm looking forward to the innovation.
In defense of the city that works, it reminds me of the bicycle helmet that was promoted as it keeps the asphalt out of your hair. It's a playful way of keeping you from thinking about the more horrible things you might think of in connection with bike helmets, just as the city that works is a nice recognition of all the civic heroes that keep the wastewater running and all the other things we don't want to think of about a city. In any case, it's better than what Garrison Keillor said. This is the best thing that Minnesotans can come up with to say about Minnesota, namely, it's not so bad. But in the corporate world, when we brand, the image is set, and then every action that the company takes is aligned to reinforce that image. And the purpose is then to grow the company by attracting the kinds of customers and suppliers and partners that you want. Now, as Randy said, in the civic context, you can only invite people to get on board behind that image. And so really my question is, with the history that we have of telling people that, and this relates to growth, telling people that please visit but don't stay. We're deeply ambivalent about economic growth. We've welcomed the high-tech industry in a tepid sort of way. And Ethan really said a mouthful when he said what we aspire to. So whatever the brand or slogan may be, I think, isn't the real question figuring out what we aspire to and connecting it with that brand. And so my question is, what are our prospects of getting that kind of at least general rough agreement about getting behind whatever image we decide upon?
Well, I think our prospects are pretty good. I think we have a track record of kind of talking in those terms. We have a language for it, and believe me, in my travels around the United States and talking to people in other metropolitan areas, many other places don't. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easier, that we're going to figure it out real quickly, but I think that's precisely the conversation that we can have and that we must have. I've kind of come to the conclusion that, you know, planning for growth means planning for becoming rabidly, you know, kind of aggressively, assertively seeking the growth that we need for this region to become what we want it to be in the places where we want it, and at the same time rapidly, aggressively, assertively planning for the preservation of parts of this region where we don't want to see much change. But it's not about just kind of, flinging our objectives out there and kind of waiting to see if anybody in the world, you know, picks up on them. And I think that, you know, what it kind of means, I guess when I look at all the planning documents we have a lot of well-articulated objectives. What we don't have are a lot of well-articulated strategies for making them happen. And that maybe the thing that we need to focus on for a while at least is the do part, you know, of the think and do. And to see what we can, you know, really make of the phenomenal civic legacy that we have here. You know, I think Lynn Bergstein and others have identified a wide range of problems for which leadership right now is critically needed. But I think, you know, there are a range of things, a range of ideas that are already before us, and we can make progress on those, maybe in different ways than we've tried in the last decade.
Jane Cronlund, this is really a follow-up on the last question, actually. In my life, I'm a nonprofit executive director, and I know for the way we do our strategic planning, you can't come up with a slogan until you come up with a mission statement. And in terms of a strategy, Randy, for the next mayor would be to focus on what the mission statement is for Portland, which is complex. I mean, there are a number of different issues in a mission statement, and then the slogan will follow from that mission statement. And I would suggest that perhaps is what we're missing.
That's great.
Can I say something here? I'm going to say this, and I have to take off to the airport. I hear a lot of discussion about a mission statement. You just talk about mission statement and everything else. In order to have a strategy, you really have to understand the culture, core values of the culture. And I don't think, you know, we talk a lot of planning here, you know. So maybe one of the values or one of the core cultural pieces of Portland is we have a planning culture. Okay, and that could be great in some, you know, areas, and could be detrimental in other areas. So just like everything else, you know, it's got your strength is your weakness. So if that's our strength, that's also our weakness. So if we want to bring, for example, I hear all these things about bringing business here and growth and all this stuff. Well, planning is great, but planning also hinders some of that. So we just have to understand what is our culture and then develop our strategy, our mission statement, everything based on really truly understand the culture, not the things that we do talk about, the things that we do, and understand what is that filter, what is that filter that what we talk about and we do makes them, you know, that difference that it creates. That's the filter, and those are the core values of the culture, and those are the things that we should use and capitalize on, because if we wanting it or not, it is what it is. It is who we are. So I just wanted to say that part, because I see going around and around about this stuff.
Thank you. We've gone almost 10 minutes over time, and I do need to end it now. I want to really show our appreciation to this wonderful panel. Thank you.